Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're taking a look at Thermaltake's the Tower 100 in racing green, if you see what I mean. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so today we'll be taking a look at Thermaltake's Tower 100 in racing green, which for those of you watching in black and white is the one next to the blue. Slightly older 80s reference there, but some of you might get it. So what is the Tower 100? So this is a ITX chassis, which has got a somewhat vertical design to it. It's got a ton of tempered glass, tons of ventilation, and lots of flexibility for adding things like graphics cards, hard drives, and plenty of fans. It is also available in various guises throughout the world, especially here in the UK from scan.co.uk, where they actually sell versions of this actually with all the bits you kind of need. So it comes with a power supply, fans, etc, etc, and there are various options available all within the green theme. So you can get things like the Tough Fan 12 in racing green. Also, Thermaltake do the Tough Ram, as you've probably seen in a previous review, again in the racing green. And there's other peripherals and accessories you can get to complement the build. Now it's available in various different colours. This obviously, as we've said, is the green version. But there's also a kind of like a pale blue version. There's a white, a black, a red, and I think there's a gold as well on the way. Some of those colours may not be available in all regions, but keep an eye out, and if you want to, check the links in the video description and you can see what's available in your local area. Now I should actually point out, this was actually sent to me for review purposes by Thermaltake themselves, and actually this is one of the review samples which has been going around the houses a little bit, so there are some bits and pieces which aren't actually in the kit, which you will receive, and obviously depending on which version you get, you may get one with different fans, a power supply, with the RAM, etc, etc, so do bear that into mind. The case itself, if you're buying it as a standalone item, just the case itself with a couple of the standard fans, which are these ones, standard non-RGB fans with a 3-pin connector, you'll be looking at somewhere in about the £100 mark here in the UK. Now it does change slightly between the different colours depending on how popular they are in your location, etc, etc, but realistically the kind of the base or recommended retail price for this particular chassis as it stands in kind of most of the colours, you should be looking to budget around about 100 UK pounds. Okay, so with all that out of the way for the intro, let's get on and take a look at the case itself, give it a quick teardown, see what the options are, and at the end I'll give you my final thoughts. Although, to be honest with you, at the moment I'm still at the point of confusion. Now, for those of you that have already seen this, when I did do a very quick unboxing on it on the live stream, you'll know that there were things going around my head, what to do with it, because obviously, being a green case, it does lend itself very well to being a themed build. But the subject of the theme is something which I'm still, to this very day, struggling with. Lots of people have had various different ideas, such as obviously the racing green theme. Obviously there's other characters and things which are inherently green. Obviously Christmas trees, that kind of thing, Christmassy stuff, does lend itself very well to green. Also you've got characters such as Shrek, and there's other sort of Marvel and cartoon characters, things like Mario, Luigi, there's an element of green to that as well. So really, the only limitations of this is actually your own imagination and how much time and effort you want to put into it. What I'm probably going to do is, first of all, I'm just going to get a build together in this, give it a good run through, see how it works, and then when it's all together, see what space I've got inside, and then look at what I'm going to do. It's potentially going to be a Christmas themed build. I think that is going to be most likely, being as I do love my RGB, and well, fairy lights generally are of the RGB variety, so that does tick that box. Anyway, let's take a look at the case. We'll tear it down, take a look inside, see what the connectivity is like, see what the storage is like, see what graphics cards we can put in, all that kind of stuff, and then you can make up your own minds whether it's going to be suitable for you. So I think we should probably start off with some of the accessories we get in the box. Now again, obviously this was sent to me as a review sample, some bits may have been mislaid, etc, but there are actually some things in here which are going to be pretty much universal, which you should definitely receive. And the first of which are these drive mounting bays. So as you can see, 2 metal bays there, or brackets. So this is suitable for 2.5-inch drives, and these actually work on a very similar principle to that of the Thermaltake, I think it's the V21 and V20 cases, the cube type ones, where these actually just slotted on the side of the case mounts. Very easy to use. Again, I'll show you how those fit a little bit later on in the video. And obviously you also get your installation guide and pamphlet, which goes through all the features, etc, etc, and tell you where things go, all that kind of usual good stuff. You also normally get some cable ties and that sort of stuff, but that isn't included. And obviously you get things like screws and mounting brackets, etc. A couple of the brackets which we didn't actually receive for this are actually for the GPU side of things. So on this side, which is the left on your screen, there are normally two plastic blanking plates there. So if you decide to go with a non-GPU build and you're just using an APU in this, then you can actually cover over the side section to make things look a little bit neater. So let's start with the case itself. As you can see, there is a considerable amount of tempered glass in this, which does not particularly lend well to reflections, as you probably see already. So what we've essentially got is on this front section, you've got basically the entire front section tempered glass. On this side, you've got like a half and half. Originally, when they designed this case, it was going to come with just 3 panels, which are identical, which are interchangeable. What they've done now is, because there was limitations of airflow, etc., they've redesigned it slightly. So now we've got these additional vents on the bottom on each side, and also you've got these sections on both the left and right hand sides. This side is going to be perfect because that's going to draw fresh air straight into where the graphics card is, should you wish to install one. And on the other side, again, it's just going to bring in some fresh air to things like your VRMs and your CPU cooler. Moving around to the back of the case, does highlight something which actually I did notice, and it's something which all case manufacturers suffer with to some extent, and that is actually color panel matching. Now you can probably see from the camera, although the camera does lie slightly, I'll give it that, but actually in real life, when you look at some of the greens on here, especially when you look at the difference between the plastic top section and the metal panels, there's a very, very slight difference in the color. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether it's down to the actual pigments in the green itself, whether there are elements of a pearlescent type finish in there, so under different circumstances, it does actually look different. And actually, depending on which angle you're on, the green does actually shift a little bit in color. So potentially there is a very small amount of pearlescent in the paint finish. So depending where the light hits it, you do get a slightly different color. The plastic bit on the top, again, like I said, is a very, very slight shade different than the metal panels, and even some of the metal panels are slightly different shades as well. Also, you'll find with the RAM and also the fans, the Thermaltake Tough fans in the green color, and also the Tough RAM in the green, it's a very, very slightly different shade of green as well. Although greens generally do tend to mix quite well, obviously camouflage, but yeah, if you're looking for an absolutely perfect finish, you're probably not going to get that unless you maybe go with either the black or the white version. Anyway, with that said, let's take a look inside. So this is the back panel. As you can see, there is a removable magnetic filter on here, so you can keep that nice and clean. And on this section here, we've got the option of mounting either a 120 or a 140mm fan. And at the bottom here, you've got the access point for your power supply. You can put in here SFX power supplies if you wanted to. I'm not entirely sure, but I think this does normally come with a bracket to allow you to install a SFX power supply. Again, sadly, for this particular version, we do not have that on hand, so I cannot show you that. I'll try and work out if that is included in the packaging by going through it later, and I'll add it onto the bottom, or put a little marker here just to say whether it's included or not. Sometimes they come with the power supply, sometimes they come with cases, depending on which cases you go for. To remove the back panel, you've got 4 captive thumb screws, so you can just remove that off, and that comes off very easily, giving you access to the rear section. So in the rear, because this is kind of like a topsy-turvy setup, the cabling and stuff is in very unusual places. So to explain what these holes are for here, they're not actually for ventilation, although they will act as ventilation. This is actually the pass-throughs for things like your USB cables and your VGA cables, that kind of stuff. Because the motherboard is kind of rotated as well, your I/O section is at the top here. So your motherboard is going to be I/O at the top, and the slot for the graphics card kind of going down this way, if you can visualize that. I'll try and put a motherboard in there later so you can see what that actually looks like. Anyway, so this is where your I/O is going to come out through this top section, and from the front I/O is your wiring for actually plugging into the motherboard, etc. That leads down to this section here, which is removable. Again, just 2 thumb screws. This section will come out. Now you can use this for multiple purposes. If you're going for a slightly more high-end system, you can actually mount either a 120 or 140mm fan in here, which will then pull air from kind of behind the motherboard out through the back of the chassis and out through the ventilation here. Or if you want to, you can actually install either 2 2.5-inch drives or 2 3.5-inch drives should you wish to. Now again, 3.5-inch drives are becoming less and less common. 2.5-inch drives still very much in the mainstream. So if you do want to add those in, you can put a couple on there. It's that or fan, entirely down to you. You cannot do a combination of the two, sadly, because of how close this is to the actual back panel. Moving down slightly more from that, at the bottom here, we've got this nice rubberized grommet section here. So this is going to be for passing through your cables to the motherboard for your things like your front I/O, your main power cables, and all that kind of good stuff. Moving right down to the very bottom, this section here is the power supply mount. So there's 4 screws, which you can remove this bracket, and then you can install your power supply into the bracket, then screw that back in after installing your power supply. Now we're going to go in a slightly different direction. So this is the top of the case, and as you can see, this whole thing is a basic massive air filter. This is removable, so just a couple of pushes on the toggle pins there, and that releases it, so you can pull the whole thing out, and you can see there's a nice fine mesh in there, so you can keep that nice and clean, nice and easy to dust or vacuum, whatever. And this gives you access here to the rear I/O. So if you imagine your I/O shield is going to be kind of in this position here, as you can see, and moving down from there is where your PCI Express expansions are going to be. There's also an included 120mm fan here. There are two of these included. The one I've got on the desk there, which would normally be installed in this back section, and you've got this one in the top here as an exhaust. Now if you want to, you can actually remove this. You possibly could, if you wanted to, put a 140mm fan in there. Alternatively, a 120mm AIO you could put in there. Do check the specifications and measurements. It is going to be a little bit on the tight side up here. Personally, I think I'm going to go with 140mm fans in here as much as I possibly can in every location possible. So the included fans will probably be dismissed, but again, if you want to use them, you're more than welcome to do so. Now the next part of this is to actually remove the side panels. Now in order to remove the side panels, they are kind of semi-captive, so they do slot outwards. So in order to do that, you're going to have to remove this plastic section, which is normally held on with 5 screws. Now I've actually taken most of the screws out, so I've just got the 4 left in, so one there, one there, one there, and one there. There's normally another little one which is tucked down inside here somewhere. So yeah, depending on what you're doing, realistically you don't need to put the screws back in if you don't want to. You can just undo the screws and leave them out, although obviously don't tilt this or turn it upside down, otherwise it's going to fall off. When the camera wasn't rolling, I've actually undone the screws on here because it's basically not very exciting, and we can take a look now at this unit. This just pops off the top, but there is actually I/O on the front here, so let's take a quick look at that. So we've got LEDs there for hard drive activity and obviously the power being on. Nice little clicky power button. Next to that there is a reset button, which is actually recessed as well, so you're not going to accidentally press it when you reach for the power button or reaching for your USBs, that kind of stuff. You've also got a separate headphone and microphone jack. Next to that there is USB 3.0 Type A, and a really nice inclusion is a USB 3.0 Type C connection as well. So if you do have a Mini-ITX motherboard which has a Type C connection, which actually is quite rare, but certainly if you've got it you can make use of it. You can buy adapters as well, although saying that, most Mini-ITX motherboards will only have one USB 3.0 port. So yeah, do bear that in mind. If you're kind of going with this case first and then building a system around it, just make sure your motherboard has got both Type C and the USB 3.0 regular connectors on there, and you'll be good to go. One thing you will notice as well, with this loosened off, this panel does become very rattly, which can be a little bit annoying, so just make sure it's firmly in place and the screws down, and once that's screwed, normally that will stay pretty much set. That is one of the downsides of this, unfortunately. When you pull this off, all of the panels are effectively loose. There's no actual screws holding these panels in place. It's purely on a kind of like a friction toggle mount, which I'll show you now. So we'll grab the glass, lift it up, and it just slots off. And if you're looking at the back of the glass, you can see there's these kind of little lugs on here. So that is what holds it in place. If you're finding it a little bit annoying and it is rattling a bit more than what you'd hope to, you can actually bend these in a little bit, and that will make sure there's a little bit more clamping force when it goes down into those receptacles. So that is the main glass on the front. There is a very slight tint to it, so that can be a good thing and a bad thing depending on what you're doing. Obviously, if you're putting something in here which you're trying to show off, then you might need to illuminate it a little bit more in order for it to be seen. But if you're doing a slightly less tidy build, then the glass will actually block out some of that, so that might well be beneficial. So that's with that panel removed. Then we can take out this side panel as well. Also, the side panels are, like we said, half glass, half filter, and there's actually removable magnetic filters in here. That is one thing you'll find, actually, there is an absolute ton of filtration on here. And it's a good thing because obviously the cutouts themselves, which are in that kind of typical Thermaltake Darth Vader's bathroom style, will actually do most of the filtration. If you want extra filtration, you can use the mesh filters, which are those really nice fine mesh filters, which actually do provide quite a lot of airflow. But if you want to go for the ultimate in airflow and leave it more open, then of course you can just leave those out and leave that semi-open. So that leaves us with one last panel on this side, so we'll take this one off as well. Again, exactly the same deal. These are pretty much reversible, so if you want to, you can put them on the other sides and they will actually fit in. It's probably not going to be beneficial, especially for the graphics card side, because you're going to have your ventilation in this side and the graphics card fans are probably going to be here. So ideally you want to keep them as they are, but again, if you're using an APU, that isn't going to make any difference. Also, another thing you can do, because the panels are all the same size, if for some reason you wanted this actually cut out, or to have half glass on the front side and just have full glass on one side, if you've got a really nice graphics card which you want to show but you don't want it to breathe, then you could put the glass on that side. So they are all interchangeable, all three. You can put them pretty much however you want to, so there is a nice degree of flexibility there. So that is the chassis with all of the sides off, and you can probably see in there, get a good look inside what it's all like. Considering it is for an ITX motherboard, it is actually quite a large case. I'll put the measurements on the screen for you right now. It isn't designed as being a compact PC. It's designed as being a kind of a slightly unusual show PC in my particular opinion. It's also extremely modular, so for modders this is going to be great because you can really get into town with this and go as crazy as you want to. Pretty much most of the panels will come off in some way, shape or form. Again, this back panel, which you can see, there are actually screws, like I said, on the back, so you can undo those two screws. That whole panel can come out, so you could alternately put something else in there should you wish to. The only real limitation is going to be the fact that the motherboard has to be rotated into a certain way. So like we said, we're going to have the I/O coming up through this section here, so your motherboard's going to be on there, I/O this way. Your VRMs are going to end up being somewhere in the kind of roundabout this situation here. But yeah, very flexible design indeed. On this section here, there is also the option on here to mount another fan should you wish to. So you can put a 120 or 140mm fan in this section here. There are other pinholes there mounted, so you can mount in things like SSDs, that kind of stuff if you want to. There's also pass-throughs just here, which will allow you to pass through SATA cables or I/O cables from the section underneath, which is where your power supply is going to live. So now you're probably wondering, how do we remove these bits at the bottom? So like I said, it is all pretty much fully modular, so these will come off. They are held in place with thumb screws, as you can see, one on each side, none on the back, because obviously that's where the power supply is going to be. So all we do, remove the thumb screw, not captive sadly, and then you can just slide that out, and again, more ventilation and filtration. So again, if you want to, you can leave that fully open, or you can put the magnetic filters in there, nice and easy to keep clean, and relatively easy to maintain, so you just undo those, take those out. Actually, if I leave those off for now, and we'll do the two side ones as well. So again, exactly the same deal. So we've got ventilation there, and also the same on that side. So that's going to give you then full access to the bottom basement section where your power supply is going to go in. And this is really good because it's got a reasonable sized basement. So if you're using a regular ATX power supply, which you can do, or an SFX power supply, you can have a ton of room in this bottom section to actually put all your cables and hide anything which you don't necessarily want on show, which is beneficial. And of course, you've got a huge amount of room here for a graphics card if you're putting one in. A triple fan design is going to be absolutely fine. There is only two slots on the top. So if you're looking at the PCI Express blanking plates, which if I try and give you a better angle of, hopefully you can just about see those there. So that's your PCI Express expansion slots there. So you've only got two there. So if you're going for a triple slot card, you might struggle a little bit. 2.5 or 2 is going to be absolutely fine, no problems there. And that is going to give you, from this top section to the bottom, give you an absolute ton of room. Again, triple fan cards going to be no problem. Actually, I should mention as well, CPU cooler height. If you're going with air cooler, you can fit an absolutely huge cooler in here. You're actually looking at CPU cooler height of around about 190mm. Graphics card wise, if you're going for the full length here, you're looking at 330mm. And power supply wise, you can actually come into the chassis about 180mm. Now obviously depending on the power supply, that may differ slightly if you've got captive cables, that kind of stuff, or modular cables. But yeah, it is essentially, you can fit in here what you would into a full-size ATX case, just on a much smaller scale. And being that most motherboards these days, we don't tend to use SLI, we don't really tend to use all the slots which are available to us. So we're actually getting to the point now where we can start having a smaller chassis, but with a minimal motherboard, but all full-size components. It's actually really appealing. So going back down to the bottom section, we didn't quite fully finish this section off. So again, Thermaltake are at it again, they're on the jazz, and there's even more filtration. So you've got this removable filter on the bottom, so that is going to be for your power supply and for the basement section. And next to that, literally underneath where the graphics card is going to live, you've got another filter and also more airflow. So this is really designed with kind of like negative airflow in mind. So we've got that fan at the top, which is going to be exhausting air out of here. You've also potentially got a 140mm fan in the back here, which is going to be pushing air out the back. And also, if you wanted to, maybe a 120 or 140mm fan here, which is going to be, again, pulling in air from this bottom section. So the bottom section being as open as it possibly can is going to be super beneficial. It's all going to be filtered as well, so you're not going to have to worry too much about dust as you normally would in a negative flow system. Of course, if you want to, you can reverse the whole lot and you can have the top fan being pushing air in, the back one pulling air in, and this one pulling air in. The choice is essentially going to be down to the individual. But I think that's pretty much it. I've covered almost everything that I can possibly think of on here. Again, it's a shame that I don't have the blanking plates to go in there so I can show you how that went. But again, it's not really the end of the world. Essentially, it's just going to cover this section here and a little bit on the side section there, just to make that look a little bit neater. Certainly not a deal breaker as far as I'm concerned. I really do think this is a nice little unusual case. It's got enough in there to keep you interested in terms of if you're a PC builder and you want a little bit of a challenge and you want to do something a little bit different, something from the normal ATX crowd. I think this ticks the box amazingly well. The amount of engineering and kind of the flexibility in it to actually get this down to a price point of around about £100, I think is actually very impressive. If you look on the market now, most cases, especially the kind of mid-range to high-end cases, are somewhere in the region between kind of £80 to £150 and then obviously beyond. So to get it to £100 with all this flexibility, all this filtration, all this modularity, I think they've done particularly well. And I should actually show you as well on the side where those hard drive cages go. So if you do want to put some 2.5-inch mechanical drives or SSDs, literally just mount your drive on there, 4 screws, and this goes on the side there. And there's little latches on the bottom, put a thumb screw down through there, and that will hold it in place. So you can put one there, and another one next to it, and that just screws into place. So yeah, 2 more drives on the back there, a couple of drives on the back on this section. Obviously you've got M.2 slots on the board, which you're probably going to be limited to 1 because it's ITX. So potentially 5 drives in a tiny little system like this is fantastic. And obviously, because of the benefits of SATA drives, no mechanical moving parts, you could, if you want to, stuff a couple more underneath. But realistically, I think you're going to run out of SATA ports on your motherboard before you run out of space to actually put things in the case. So I think that's going to pretty much wrap this one up. Hopefully you've enjoyed having a take a look at this case. It certainly is an unusual one. I'm genuinely looking forward to doing a build on this. It is going to be something very different. We will be doing it in a live stream, so if you want to check that out, make sure you join us on our Saturday evening live streams, and you can sit back, relax, have a beer with us, and watch the build in progress. But for now, I think that's going to be it. So this has been Thermaltake's Tower 100. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.